You've entered the gray area, the intersection of culture and technology. I'm your host, Angela Benton. Okay, back at it again. And today we have, I'm actually really excited. I'm excited about all of our conversations, but I'm really excited about this conversation with Kenan Weaver. And so for those of you that might just be tuning in, I'll do posts from time to time asking folks who are based in LA, some folks may be visiting LA, if they want to be a guest co-host on the gray area. And so my whole thought process around that is really to just have a regular old conversation, good old fashioned conversation and dialogue. And so Kenan Weaver reached out to me, and so when I'm picking guest co-hosts, I don't really have a ton of background information. I really am just kind of going with my gut. And so, Kenan, I'll let you explain your background and everything, and then you guys will understand as we get through the conversation why I'm so excited to have Kenan on, especially given everything that I've been talking about. But Kenan, tell us about what you're working on, your background in technology.
Yeah. So for 15 years, I've been helping enterprise organizations digitize some part of their business process. So it's always changed. I've helped the banking industry with their data. I've helped HR companies with their workforce management solutions and institute that across. And today I'm doing that for the mortgage industry.
Okay.
So that's my background. I'm located in LA now, originally from New York, because part of that journey, I decided to live a life without regret.
Yeah.
And I tried stand-up comedy.
Right.
So back in New York, I was doing it for 5 years, and I got the chance to create a show, but also pitch that show.
Oh, wow.
So I was going back and forth, and then something told me to just go all in.
Why not?
And right before the HBO pitch, I just bought a one-way ticket.
Yeah. And
I haven't been back to New York since.
I love it.
Last year.
I love it because you only really have one life. A lot of times we forget that. Okay, so a lot of your work in banking and compliance, you actually mentioned that you had, and guys, I did not know any of this prior to having Kenan on, but he actually has experience doing compliance with GDPR. And so GDPR is basically the privacy law for the EU, data privacy law. Yep.
Yeah. So as far as the globe goes, that's pretty much what set the precedent for governments protecting its citizens on the data breaches and the data access, these large organizations and small organizations. So that then has now creeped up to the U.S. that is always a little bit behind,
right?
Being reactionary. And while we haven't gotten a bill for federal yet, which is what the EU is. It's across the board.
Yep.
We have a few states, California's, which is the CCPA that we're talking about. Nevada has a light one.
Yep.
And I believe Maine.
Right. And then New York has something that's bubbling up too.
So other states definitely have conversations, but these are the first three in the U.S. that are implemented and in effect.
Right. And so, guys, these regulations are important because it's what helps you actually own your data. And so a lot of people it just seems like from what I've been talking about on Instagram, a lot of people don't know or understand what it really means. Number one, to get your data, to own it, and what the hell do you do with it afterwards? Yeah.
So to back up, we'll give it's the California Consumer Privacy Act. And basically it's for businesses that does business in California. So it's not a business that operates in California. You could be home based in New York.
Right.
And if you have somebody that lives in the state of California interact with your site and you collect data, you would have to be compliant to the CCPA.
Right. And so that is pretty much every business. California is huge. It's the fifth largest economy in the world. So pretty much every business, you're going to have at least one customer in California. And so I think a lot of people they hear CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act, and they think California, so it doesn't have anything to do with it. But it does. It actually affects, all of us. And so what it says is what you were saying, that companies have to comply by providing their data or consumer data to them. So they have to have the right to delete it, correct?
Yes. Ask for it.
You have to be able to ask for it. Also, soft plug for Streamlytics right now, but this is actually why we launched Get My Data. And so if you guys are interested in doing a data request, you can do so on getmydata.io. We're actually making some changes and updates. When we launched it, we were the first service to actually launch this on January 1st. And so many companies they hadn't launched their privacy portals yet or anything like that. And so many companies were still kind of in the process of doing that. And the data request process was somewhat manual. I think for a fair amount of companies that's been kind of worked out. There's still a few companies that, provide you your data, but it's not all of your data really. It's like partial, Apple being one of them. And so you can still use getmydata.io to request your data, and really just to do it all in one step.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's a great step. Like I personally feel the intent was good. I don't know about the application and execution. We're very early, so I'm not going to really judge it, but I'm leery about it. For
what
2
are you
points.
leery about?
One, as we kind of stated, the GDPR is for federal.
Right.
So I'm not federal, but across their unions now, not Britain.
Right.
They opted out.
Right.
But here it's going to be piecemeal unless our federal government gets compliance across the board.
Right.
So it's really hard. You mentioned some of the larger companies. It's definitely going to be hard for them. But what about those like the next tier that might not have the huge resources to get this under order in time?
For sure.
So when GDPR came, business had 2 years but with the law in hand. And here they got the last finalized draft in October of 2019. So that's 2 months. And the Attorney General, while is not going to really enforce the law till July 20th. That's very quick.
It is very quick, yeah. It's very quick, but I think it's needed though, just because of what the world is changing right now, and like everything is powered off data. And we have an episode that even talks about healthcare data, and so the implications, I think a lot of times people think social media data, but it's like no, it's deeper.
It's
like
just
it's way
PII,
deeper.
which is anything that identifies your person through the internet. Yes,
and PII is personal identifying information for those of you that don't know. So actually, we can pull up this article, and we were talking about this a bit over email. What was interesting about this is it's basically the first CCPA related cases, basically class action lawsuits, and kind of what they are revealing. So what did you think about this article?
I guess this is one reason why I'm leery. I guess this entity, she was trying to sue for a breach that happened prior to the effect of the law. So it's probably going to get completely thrown out. But it's like a sign of what's to come. And why I think, because I help businesses, I'm looking at through their lens, it's going to be hard to figure out what negligence is. When it comes to the data breaches.
Well, partly, okay, that's partly because there is no third party involved in this, and so that's actually part of why we even launched Get My Data, because what we noticed is, even if there was not necessarily a breach, but let's just say a company wasn't compliant, no one really knows that outside of the consumer and outside of the business. And it only really gets escalated if the consumer takes the initiative, right? So there's almost like this need for a third party person to track, requests or whatever, and actually work with lawmakers.
I mean, you mentioned how fast times are changing, and I really think that third party should be governmental.
Yeah.
We have our three branches.
Yeah.
I feel like at this day and age, we need a fourth branch that is strictly has a tech background and figures out just how to protect their citizens with technology as it changes. I mean, I watch all the congressional hearings when Zuckerberg had to go to D.C., Google CEO had to go, and I'm watching these senators and politicians ask questions that have no idea what they're talking about.
They don't. And I've read a lot of hearings, just mainly because of the work that we're doing with Streamlytics. I've read a lot of hearings, and it's interesting the questions that are being asked. You can tell they're being asked from someone who doesn't have deep knowledge. And so even in the respect of it's concerning because it's how the law is being written by people who don't really understand technology that much. So, even I think the last episode we talked about in the law, basically consumers being able to actually have their data and the data actually being portable. Okay. Well, Google, Facebook, Amazon, everybody is like, okay, fine, here's your data, but you can't really do anything with it. You can't even transfer it to another service. There's no kind of unified format or anything. And lawmakers who don't necessarily have a background in technology are like, they're just saying, okay, well, yeah, they provided the data. That's what we asked for. Okay, check. But it's not really check. It's because it's still not really usable.
And I'll give you a gap that they probably didn't look at. This is a big opportunity for phishing scams. If you're not verifying the identity of the person that is requesting your data or the ways that is being requested, someone else can request your information, having just 2 or 3 pieces of information that might be public record, and then get all your data.
Yeah. So actually, let's talk about GDPR, because in the EU, I think part of what they require is an ID to actually request your data.
And they've been doing iterations and amendments to it and things of that nature. I feel if I was a citizen, much more safe there as opposed to here. I think they're a little bit more competent. But the fact that they have theirs across the board, you see the fines coming in now.
Right.
Facebook was just hit with one a couple of weeks ago from the EU. So I think there was a clear definition of how it was going to be executed and enforced. And like I said, that was clear for 2 years.
Yeah.
So if you weren't ready, pay that $50 million. Like, I have no sympathy for you.
Right.
Here, I definitely have sympathy for some of these businesses. I get the intent to me is very good. It's needed as a consumer, but what is it actually protecting? I'm not sure just yet. Gotta wait for that to happen, to wait and see. But you should be able to delete your data. That's cool if you want to request that. If you want to request your data, that's good. The opt-in of it's tricky.
What do you think is tricky about? And I think everyone is probably seeing this. So what we're talking about, the opt-in thing, is you may notice as you're going to different websites on your phone or otherwise, you'll get a pop-up that basically allows you to opt in to share your data before you peruse, the rest of the site. And so what do you think is tricky about that?
I just think consumers aren't even educated on it. Most of us go to a web page and we just click whatever the button is necessary to move forward. And there's different regulations for the ages. So I think the age is 16. They have the option to opt in. Anybody older, we are opting out if you're a California state resident. But as I stated, across the board, if you're not of this state, but you do business with people that are residents of it, you're kind of just going to make something that's probably just like, all right, let me focus on being compliant with CCPA. And then whether you live in Virginia, you're just going to have to go through this thing. So now what are they opting into?
Right. Well, but this is exactly why we need a federal law around it. So what are your thoughts around timeline? Like how, I mean, Grant, it's not that you're necessarily in policy, but just with your experience with GDPR and everything, what do you think timeline is going to be for implementation of a federal law that protects, our data? I mean, granted, everything is being dealt with at the state level. And so you mentioned, like, I think the top 3 states that are kind of leading this effort, but like, how long do you, I don't think anything's going to happen in 2020 just because it's an election year and, it's other stuff going on, but how long do you think?
Well, I think just because of the election year, you're automatically going to put it out a year.
Sure.
Till the new, whatever administration turns over, if it does turn over, hopefully I'm praying to God it turns over, right?
Right.
But not until after that.
Right.
Not even going to see anything.
Right.
Then that's probably going to be another year for whatever that administration is. Even if it's the current administration, they haven't done nothing in the 4. Right. So federally, I think we're at least 2 years out.
Yeah.
And then that's when you're going to see these other states. Like I said, I commend California. They're always progressive in, these technical laws. So, because they had one in 2003 as well for the data. And that was like an online consumer act that they created. So they're always up ahead of it. But when we start getting 13 states and 25 states, technically this is going to be like a huge ordeal. It's just like a patchwork.
Yeah.
That I don't know.
Yeah. It definitely makes it complicated. What was I going to ask you? Oh, so actually the next thing that I was going to ask you was, all right, so even in this conversation, I'm an advocate for the consumers. You have most of your experience working with businesses. One of the things that I've noticed on the consumer side of things is partial data being provided under the guise of a company giving you all of your data. And so, and I brought this up a little bit earlier in the conversation, the biggest thing that I've noticed is just going through the data request process for like Apple, which is huge. And I'm also comparing this to like a Google or a Facebook, where I've been through their data request process. They give you everything. They're like, here. Apple.
So have you received from your data from those 2 entities through this actual CCPA request? Okay.
I've gotten my data from Amazon. I have tons of data, and part of it is, the products and stuff that we're working on. I generally request my data so that we have an initial data set that we are working from, just from a structure perspective. I've requested my data from Amazon, Facebook, and by Facebook I mean Facebook proper, but Instagram, WhatsApp. How long did it take for them to give you your request? So Facebook is quick. You get it like within the same day. Google also quick. You get it basically within the same day. Amazon is long as hell. It takes about 20 to 23 days to actually get your data. In fact, I just initiated another data request from Amazon, which I just got, and I did that maybe about 2 weeks ago. But what I do notice is their time frame is getting shorter and shorter, at least with Amazon. Apple, maybe like 2 or 3 days. My issue, and honestly my beef with Apple, is that they are such a huge company, and Tim Cook and company are taking the stance of being pro-privacy.
Yeah, privacy is like their marketing scheme right now.
Yeah, that exactly. Their marketing, push or talking points. But when you actually request your data, they are not actually giving you all of your data. Like when I look through my Google data, I can see everything. I can see my location data. You know, I used to be on Android. Like I was on Apple originally, then I went to Android for a little bit. Now I'm back on Apple. But, you know, I can see like my location data from my phone and everything. Apple, it feels like they try to focus more on the content that you are adding to the device. So let's just say pictures, right? They do have an option where you can get your location data and stuff. But what was also most interesting is, you know, Google is not, when they're providing you your data, they're not taking, I guess, a stance of, we know you're not doing a lot on the phone. They know you're doing a lot on the phone, and they're saying, here's all the data that's associated with everything that you're doing in your life on the phone. Apple is not doing that. It's almost like Apple is.
So did you receive something from Apple and it was just partial?
Yes.
Or so I'm just going to be
all of the streaming data is not there.
Devil advocate for it. Could that be that Apple has been working to make sure that they're not housing your data? They provided what they have. Because Apple devices, they kind of store most of your data on the device, not in their cloud and their server. Google has everything that you do. They have it. They can provide it. Apple takes some extra steps that other organizations aren't doing in order to make sure that they do not carry it. So let's do Google Maps versus Apple Maps. All right. You put in the location that you're going to and how long you've been there, where you're coming back from, all of that. Google is one-to-one. You have your location. They give it to you. Apple has an extra layer where when you make a request for a location, on their server, they actually throw like 10 other locations. You get directions for yours, but the computing system and what's in the cloud has 10. So it's harder to pinpoint. Did I just lose? It's harder to pinpoint your location. So I'm just wondering. That's really a question.
I mean, that's fair. I don't know how I don't really know the details of how they're processing a lot of the data, but what I do know is in order for Apple to make recommendations, they have to have your data because the recommendation engine is based on your data. So they have it. So if they're telling me what I should watch on Apple TV or on, you know, Apple Music, it's because they know what I'm already listening to. So I guess they do have the data.
They have some.
They're just not providing it to, and regardless of if they have some of it or all of it, whatever they have needs to be provided to the consumer. And what's happening though in the privacy portal, they actually do say your streaming data is excluded. They say that in like little italics. And even when you go through the process, it's excluded. They're telling you that it's excluded. But my whole thing is, you know, I think the last time I checked, Apple was maybe like $1.2 trillion market cap. I just feel like, you know, the size of the company and the talking points around privacy and what's happening in actuality, I don't think there's room for error.
Okay.
So.
No, I mean, I that's more of just like a question. I don't know. But that's what I mean by kind of like even leery on the actual protection of the consumer. Because it's like, when we get this, what are we doing? And did it protect us? Like, this is here because of the Cambridge Analytica.
Oh, for sure.
Like, that's the only reason. Trying to prevent that. I don't see that being prevented in any way with this. Like, so you requested your data. Now you got to print out on your computer, or you printed it out. Okay. Now what? You might have requested to delete your data. That's cool. But are you going to do that like every week? Are you going to do that every
But that's to your point where it's almost like, you know, what you're saying, even though when the law goes into effect, like how feasible is it, right? Because it gets us there. And of course, you have to start everywhere. So no knock on that. I'm happy about it and everything. But like you said, even if you delete your data, like how often now are you going to delete your data? Are there, mechanisms that will automatically delete your data, or you can just opt out from storing your data? Or actually some companies, I think it might be, I'm not going to say the name of the company name because it's a big name, and I need to fact check myself. But there was one large company streaming service that we were looking at, and some of the smaller streaming services are also doing this, who don't have privacy portals. They are limiting how often you can even request your data. So they're saying like you can request your data once a year, which is
like it's a FICO score.
Yeah, like it's a FICO score. Exactly. So I don't know what the point I was making about that, but it's really, to your point, is like, we do have to start someplace, but it's like,
it's too open. It's like a wild, like I just don't know what the consequences are. Right. I think one thing that we overlooked also is you can request to make sure your data is not sold.
Yes. Yeah.
And at the moment, I think that's probably like the best option.
Right.
Like if that's something that you don't, go do that. Request and make sure that they're not selling your data to a third party.
Sure.
But after that, it's like, I have no idea how to consult to a business to say, all right, these are the fines that are coming down.
Right.
This is what you need to do to make sure that you don't get fines. And then on the flip side, for the consumer, I'm like, I don't know how much this is protecting. So that's why I'll like big up your Streamlit. Like that's needed. Like these entities are needed to actually protect in execution.
Right.
Intention.
Right.
I said the intention is good. Right. I'm going for the execution.
Yeah.
I don't know how the application of this is going to.
Yeah. Well, that's part of what's exciting about this. Like, hopefully this will develop a whole ecosystem. And I'm sure you noticed this with GDPR and working with companies there. It literally is like a whole ecosystem of new businesses popped up.
Like it's a new opportunity for any of you entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah.
Figure out one thing to solve within this mess.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure you might have a good exit or whatever you're trying to do with that.
Right. Okay. On that note, we are going to wrap. This was such a good conversation. But actually, Kenan, I wanted to give you the last word because, I know a lot of entrepreneurs follow me, and I'm talking a lot now about how a lot of the privacy stuff is affecting consumers. But if you have any tips for, entrepreneurs, smaller businesses, in terms of what they should take into account with data that they have on their customers, please feel free.
I think we definitely kept this at a very high level, but more focused on these larger companies.
Sure.
If you're say a social media influencer and you have a companion website that collects some type of data, you really need to be up on this. Make sure that you are either qualified or disqualified from being compliant. There's 3 things. Look it up. One is like whether half of your revenue comes from the selling of other people's data.
Right.
So think like a blog.
Yep.
Right. Like if you're doing something and you're selling that data to ads, things of that nature, you might be compliant. If you have like 50,000 residents of California throughout the year touch your website and interact with your website, you would have to be compliant.
Right.
And the other threshold is 25 million in revenue.
Right.
So there's 3 like thresholds. Sometimes they're counterintuitive. Sometimes they work together. Just go find out. And then, of course, this is a conversation from we're not lawyers.
Right.
So you gotta consult with privacy laws and a lawyer to really, get in the weeds if you're trying to do this.
Thanks for that disclaimer. Yes, guys, we're not lawyers. So please contact an attorney if you want to learn more about California Consumer Privacy Act. You can also go to the state of California. The Attorney General's website has a ton of very detailed information about this and how to stay compliant. You just gave like three really good points that people can do a deeper dive. Like, obviously, if you're a very, very small company, this is not necessarily something you need to like stress about. But if you are a small business that's growing, or like you say, you have a certain number, you're reaching a certain number of people that are in California, then yet something that you should take into account. And so, okay, great. On that note,
thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for coming. And we'll have to have you back and maybe even do another episode that's maybe specifically focused on business. Actually, guys, let me know if this is something that you want. DM me if you're a small business and want another episode that's more detailed around compliance for small businesses, and then we can hook that up. Okay. All right. That's the gray area.